American student who came home from North Korea in a coma are breaking their silence. Fred and Cindy Warmbier told Fox and Friends about that harrowing moment when they saw their 22-year-old son Otto on the plane after his return from 17 months captivity.
We heard this howling, involuntary, inhuman sound. We weren't really certain what it was. We climbed to the top of the steps and we looked in, and Otto was on the stretcher across in the plane, and he was jerking violently, making these inhuman sounds.
They say it was obvious their son had been tortured by the North Koreans.
Otto had a shaved head. He had a feeding tube coming out of his nose. He was staring blankly into space, jerking violently. He was blind. He was deaf. As we looked at him and tried to comfort him, it looked like someone had taken a pair of pliers and rearranged his bottom teeth.
Otto, from a Cincinnati suburb, was on a group tour of North Korea when he was accused of trying to steal a propaganda poster.
I entirely beg you, please, I have made the worst mistake of my life.
Despite his desperate pleas, he was sentenced to 15 years hard labor. He died 6 days after his release.
No mother, no parent should ever have gone through what we went through.
Excuse me, waiter. I ordered the soup.
American Otto Warmbier, a student at the University of Virginia, put on display for the media by the North Korean government.
I have made the worst mistake of my life.
Bless his heart, Otto was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for apparently trying to take a propaganda poster from a hotel.
That's not the image that I have of my son in my heart. We were told early on by the past administration that we were urged to keep quiet, and we accepted that.
We'll be fine as a family as soon as you get home.
Hang in there, Tiger Boy. You're coming home.
The Department of State has secured the release of Otto Warmbier.
We're also thankful to Rex Tillerson and to President Trump. They wanted Otto home. Otto's not in great shape right now, and he's been through a real tough time.
He has not engaged in any purposeful movements or behaviors.
Otto had been terrorized and brutalized for 18 months.
A young college student back home to his parents, unresponsive and in a coma.
And I knelt down by his side and I hugged him. And I told him I missed him, and I was so glad that he made it home. I'm able to wear the jacket that he wore.
I just wanted to pass on word that Otto Warmbier has just passed away.
I haven't ever seen him that disturbed or emotional in a very long time.
Our thoughts and our prayers remain with his wonderful family.
Tough to watch. Otto Warmbier's parents are here, Fred and Cindy Warmbier. They're joining us now in their first television interview since that day, since their son came home and then passed away. Thank you for being here. Why did you decide you wanted to tell your story now?
Thanks for having us, Ainsley. It's been 3 months since Otto has died and we buried him. And our family has had time to come together and process this horrible situation, do some healing. But now we see North Korea claiming to be a victim, and that the world is picking on them. And we're here to tell you, North Korea is not a victim. They're terrorists. They kidnapped Otto. They tortured him. They intentionally injured him. They are not victims. They're terrorists. And we're here to tell the story of what it was like when we met Otto at the airport, or to share with you what it was like when we met Otto at the airport.
Well, you said, we just want you home, Tiger Boy. And Cindy, you said, when you're home, we're going to be just fine. They sent him home in a coma, and 6 days later, he passes away. What was that like when you saw him for the first time after being gone, separated from him for 1.5 years?
Well, we thought he was in a coma, but you couldn't call it a coma. When I talked to Senator Portman that morning, he said Otto was on a plane coming home, and I asked him, is there brain damage? And he said, there's severe brain damage. So what we pictured, because we're optimists, was that Otto would be asleep and maybe in a medically induced coma. And then when our doctors here would work with him and he'd get the best care and love, that he would come out of it. And Fred's going to tell you what happened when we went on the plane.
I'll describe to you what it was like for our family when we met Otto at the airport. We were in a waiting room with the medical team as the plane arrived. It was determined that the medical team would go on the plane before our family. They went on the plane. 5 minutes or so later, they came down and they said it was time for our family to go to the plane. It was myself, Cindy, Austin, and Greta. We walked over to the plane. The engines are still humming. They had just landed. We walked up the steps. When we got halfway up the steps, we heard this howling, involuntary, inhuman sound. We weren't really certain what it was. We climbed to the top of the steps and we looked in, and Otto was on the stretcher across in the plane, and he was jerking violently, making these inhuman sounds. Cindy and Greta ran off the plane. Austin and I walked over to Otto. Otto had a shaved head. He had a feeding tube coming out of his nose. He was staring blankly into space, jerking violently. He was blind. He was deaf. As we looked at him and tried to comfort him, it looked like someone had taken a pair of pliers and rearranged his bottom teeth. Within 2 days of Otto being home, his fever spiked to 104 degrees. He had a large scar on his right foot. North Korea is not a victim. They're terrorists. They purposely and intentionally injured Otto.
As a parent, how do you get through that? How do you move on from this?
Well, you know, we weren't prepared for what we had. And then when we saw Otto the way he was, we loved him, we're proud of him, but no mother, no parent should ever have gone through what we went through. And the fact that Otto was alone all that time with no one to comfort him is inexcusable. And whatever happened, I mean, why would you do this? This is not...
Why do you think they sent him home?
He was going to die.
How can you question what a terrorist country does? They're terrorists. This is what they do. They kidnapped Otto. They tortured him.
For allegedly trying to steal a propaganda sign. He's 21 years old, University of Virginia, one of the toughest schools to get into. He's a bright kid. So what is your message for this administration? I know the past administration, you said they told you to stay silent. You credited President Trump and his administration for bringing your son home. What message do you have for him now as we are dealing with this awful, evil dictator, Kim Jong-un?
Absolutely. It was astounding to Cindy and I to discover that North Korea is not listed as a state sponsor of terror. We owe it to the world to list North Korea as a state sponsor of terror.
How are your other children doing, Austin and Greta?
Amazing.
Yeah. Greta and I, when Greta ran off the plane, and I was so worried because she was screaming, because our image of Otto, as you know, was of someone just wonderful, beautiful inside and out, and to see how he came home was too much for us. But I almost passed out, but I got it together and I rode in the ambulance with him because I did not want him to be alone anymore. He'd been alone for way too long, and we stayed with him and loved him as best as we could.
I'm glad you got to be with him in his final moments. Thank you both for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for
God
having
bless
us.
you.
Thank you.
More Fox and Friends coming up in just a moment.